Hello, welcome. Welcome to Small Things Brought Together. My name is Robin Love. Small Things Brought Together is an ongoing series of conversations with artists and others about their creative process. These are long format conversations, meaning that we give ourselves time to wander, to circle back, to sit in silence, and to really dig deeper into what is it that artists are doing and others are doing in the process of creating their work. So today, welcome. I am so excited to be speaking with Suzette Clough. Suzette is a painter, but that hardly sums up what she does. She has an approach to art making that enters the realm of, I want to say, magic and mystery, deep spiritual practice, medicine. And I am so excited that it brings us together to dive into this process. Also, just to say, Suzette, born in Australia, but has lived in England for a long time. And we are speaking to you, Suzette. Welcome from
Thank
your
you, Robin.
home or studio, I'm not sure, in London, correct?
Yeah. This is my home, and the garden is in the back. Yeah.
Yeah, welcome, Suzette.
Thank
Welcome to.
you. Thank you. Yeah.
So, in that short, incomplete introduction, is there anything you'd like to add that would be good for people to know about you and your background? It could be education or other experiences that have helped create you as an artist.
Firstly, it was really moving to hear you speak about my practice in that way. Um, I I do feel that in many ways, what I'm working with is um, I, I could say magic, but it's really earth. Um, Devas, kind of I'm working with pattern beings and working with patterns that exist in everything. So, and I would love to kind of continue talking about that. In terms of things that might be important to kind of like in terms of my own art practice, I'm also a psychotherapist and I trained in body psychotherapy about 35 years ago. Um, and I do consider that to be a really important part of my practice as an artist. And also that I was in very, very long term psychoanalytic psychotherapy. And I also see that as part of um, how I understand my own practice, but also how I work with other people when I'm teaching another part of my practice called visual medicine. Um, yeah. So
Yeah, I feel like I knew I would have 100 questions immediately. Yeah,
I
so.
love it. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear that, I think, oh, like, say more. Do you mean, because when thinking about like psychotherapy, I go to like, oh, exploring mind, exploring consciousness, exploring what does that mean in terms of a human being living in a body, moving through the world, and how that affects them. Um, what does it mean for you?
Um, it's such a kind of rich dive into that. I actually, when I was at art school, I had a psychotic breakdown, and it was partly caused by coming off um, speed. I was addicted to dieting drugs, but that was the kind of top layer of something that was much deeper in my life, which was how I was in the world as a woman. And I think as difficult and as traumatic as that psychotic breakdown was, it was also the beginning of actually having a real creative practice. It was the turning point in my work as an artist but also it led me sort of probably within 7 years to training as a psychotherapist. And it wasn't that I entered the training um, in good shape. I didn't. I really trained as a therapist to recover myself. So for me, the training that I chose to do, which was in body psychotherapy, was really a way of beginning to have a body, to live inside a body. And it took many, many years of practicing to be able to feel like I arrived in, into my own experience of myself and my body. And, disconnecting my own practice as an artist with that journey, I think my paintings, when you look at them, they are about materiality. They are very physical, and it's one of the deeper kind of energetic themes that I've been working with for many years. And the theme of having a relationship with the material world, but that material world also, I could say, is also my body. It's the body of the earth. It's the body minds of other people. um, it's a way of kind of forming a relationship that is not just word only, or it's a way of deepening into connection.
Mm.
So that training as a psychotherapist, particularly how I trained, has been really, really important in how my work has developed, both as a teacher, but also as an artist.
So interesting. You said, not in word only, and we'll look at your work in just a moment. And, but then when you said that, I was like, yes, like, there's, when you're working with a therapist, it's very talk oriented. And as a teacher, mostly we communicate with words, but your work is not words. It's not.
Yes, yes, yeah. I think that my work is, when people stand in front of it, what I want them to have is an embodied experience of a relationship. I think, and that relationship is not with me necessarily, but with the 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 kind of relational beings that I work with in order to produce my bigger paintings. Um, and when I'm working with visual medicine, which is the teaching practice that I've developed, it's, the pages of kind of postcard size images. I'll just show you. Like, this is probably, it's like this is a large postcard. So the images are much, much smaller, but the same principle applies. What I'm wanting to do is create a space for relationship to happen. So in my teaching practice with others, I want them um, to have the encounter that takes them into relationship. And I think that's very, very connected to not just training as a psychotherapist, but in some way, it's probably always been in the field of my need to develop myself. It's like, how do I have a relationship with the living world that in some way doesn't leave me peripheral, but involves me? How do I step into this, this living world in such a way that I too am part of it, or know that I'm part of it, that I'm not just a bystander, or um, sort of on the outside of something. And I
Mm.
think when I had my first breakdown, that was the relationship that that was calling me, was calling me to begin to have a real relationship with myself.
Mm. Yeah, so when you say like standing outside, I can't help but think about our current state of the world, and people highly distracted. I'll include myself, on my phone too much, and yeah, almost afraid of that connection. um yeah, I don't know, so could you say a little more about like how you see that, like what is inside, what is outside?
I think what it's interesting, what I thought you were going to say is highly distressed.
Well, that
And I
too.
think, yeah, and I think that what I've found with my own practice is that that distress that, when I was 20 and at art school, which was really, it had been in my life before, but it was as if it kind of, having a psychotic breakdown. It's like it's inescapable moment. You can't run away from it. You can't distract yourself. It's so kind of profoundly encounter with that level of distress. Um, and my practice, what I've found out from my work really is it's like in going in and in and in, and also kind of finding ways of coming out. It's not being stuck inside. It's a way of listening, and I think that is one of the themes, or of my work, which is ways of listening to the material of the canvas, of the paint, of the wax, you know of the ways in which I work. It's a way of listening and letting that voice of that materiality speak through to me. And that's my teaching practice as well. How do we as artists find ways of helping people to listen in extraordinary ways, not just to do this, do that, or make this better. It's like ways in which that part of our minds, which is very, kind of fluid and also very subtle and nuanced, can actually be our friend, can speak to the part of us that is distressed and distracted. But I think what, in that question is like, we are longing for ways in which we can feel held by bigger energy, by energy that can actually hold us and nourish us.
Mm, mm, mm. I feel like you're singing my song.
It's really interesting talking with you now. I can feel the level of emotion that this brings up, because not only do I feel deeply passionate about it, I think it sits on a very deep inner wound in me, but I think we're also talking about a cultural wound that is so gaping. How do we speak into that void in a way that is not just seeing it as, kind of a gash, but seeing it as a thing that we have to face. How can we face this part of the world's story now, with and I don't even know if skill's the right word, but a language system that can actually speak, therapeutically, healingly into that place of all of us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, when I said distracted, I think really it's that fear of looking straight at it.
Mm,
And like you said, it takes a psychotic break to be like, there's no, your back is up against the wall and the headlights are coming right for you, and
mm,
there's nowhere to hide or run.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 And that, I mean, that sort of that lasted for quite a long time, and the impact of that, the imprint of that was, a very, very strong driver in my life. But I also think it, as I said in the beginning, it's like it has been one of the most healing encounters. It set the trajectory of my creative work for the next, I think I was 20, I'm now 65, so 45 years. And I'm sure it will be there until I leave this dimension, because it's rich, it's real, and it's also a way of, I think, working with healing potentials that we all can access as
Mm,
well.
mm. Yeah, I think a lot about in life, but certainly in a creative life, a creative practice, this idea of success and failure, good and bad, and just how unreliable all of that is, that
Mm,
those frameworks are, because the thing that I'm sure in the moment felt like the worst thing that's ever happened to you has clearly been in some ways the best thing that ever
mm,
happened,
yeah.
and so how do we even know, how do we even, why do we even have all these frameworks that are so unreliable? But
Mm.
that's maybe another
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe this is a good time to actually look at some of your
Yeah.
work.
That sounds great.
I'd
Yeah.
love to share my screen. And so I have just called up, I have a few things available, and please just tell me where you want to go with it. So I'm going to call up your website, which I have right now focused on the Earthworks page.
Mm.
But we can move to anywhere. We can move. I also have the visual medicine and your Instagram called up. Um,
I think it would be great to stay with the big paintings to start with.
mhm.
And I would love to talk a little bit about my working practice, but also, um, what it is that I'm actually working with when I'm working.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, so I just moved the
We
screen
can
up a
we can
bit.
stay here, and
Yeah, to get
yeah,
us. So when you
yeah,
say
yeah.
large, can you just even say the scale?
So this piece is called Sequoia, and there are two pieces. It's twin pieces, and they're made on linen and with beeswax and natural pigments and inks. And the size of them it's like they're about sort of in metric, they're like 180 centimeters by 150 centimeters each piece. So they're about 6'5", 6'6", and 4'3" or 4", something like that wide. Um, and it's when I made them, um, I never used linen before, and I mean I haven't actually used linen since, but I found it a beautiful material to work with. And when I was working with these two pieces, how I work with my big paintings, I work with something that I call protocols, and I do that in visual medicine. Visual medicine is also a protocol, but the way in which I work as a painter on these bigger pieces is, um, I try to create processes that allow me to step both into the painting and out of it at the same time. So when I'm working, all my work, I make sort of 4 or 5, 6 big pieces at the same time. So I make bodies. That's what I call the first part of the process. So the bodies are shapes of paintings which are usually constructed canvas. So these are pieces of linen that are doubled or tripled in parts, and I glue them together. And through that phase of the painting, I'm actually sort of I'm I'm really sort of just kind of a little bit like I'm conceiving, but not consciously. I'm stepping into the world of the painting before it's born through the actual being painted. So for Sequoia, I mean, you could say they're twins, but I wasn't aware of that at the time. I painted them alongside, in fact, lengthways, so they were top to bottom, not side by side when I created them. And when I put them together, I suddenly saw that they were like the trunk of a really giant girthed sequoia tree. And my working practice and why I work with protocols is that I am working with um, what I now understand to be sort of like earth pattern devas, but I'm working with a body of creation devas. I mean, I'm calling them that because I'm working in a kind of unconscious way where the source of what I'm bringing through onto the painting are bigger energy systems, pattern systems that sit within the body of the world. So these pattern systems are in everything. They're from, the very cells of our body to the star system. And these pattern systems also live within tree bark, and they live within leaf cell structure. They live inside our bodies and they live outside our bodies. And the way in which I work is that I am forming a relationship with these energy systems and, in a sense, inviting them into the canvas. And I am preparing a relational dialogue, a matrix for them to come through onto the canvas. And the protocols I work with are like, I will first create the body, then I will often use beeswax as a kind of substrate. When I'm working, I only ever use whole systems to cover the canvas or the linen or the paper. I never work on a corner. I work on the whole thing all the time. So if I'm using black, I use black over everything. Or if I'm using terracotta, I use it over every part of the painting. So what comes through is how the painting, in a sense, wants to be painted itself. So I'm working with the idea that I, as the painter, as the artist, is I'm trying to allow the painting to become its own true nature. And that, of course, has a lot of connections to, other ideas through spiritual practices, where we might be trying to kind of allow the true nature of that being to shine. And I hold that as a very as kind of the coherent pattern when I'm working with anything. I am trying to allow the voice, the energetic being that wants to come through, to speak in its own way. And my work as the kind of creator, the holder of this space, is to kind of work with all the skills that I have over 50 years to allow that to speak as coherently, as beautifully as it wants to or can.
Maybe this is a good place just to take a pause. I just want to take a pause and just like take all that in. Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, you've said a lot. The images say a lot also. Thinking about as you're talking about like patterns and systems of patterns and relationship. I mean, that's so interesting to me that word just keeps coming back again and again and again. And creating what you're calling protocols, having talked to some other artists who have talk about having a structure, or, I'm thinking of one in particular who talked about it sort of as like creating rules for themselves. And within that structure, those rules, then there's like this potential for anything to happen. But it's not just like crazy. And even when you were talking about, before we looked at the work, having a way to move in, but also a way to move out. And when I think about like a psychotic break, I think, yeah, that's somebody who's gone in and they don't know the way to come out. They're trapped. And so working with such powerful forces, in this way, like I really hear, what I hear is like you are like the vehicle in a way, not even so much a vessel, because it is going through, it's coming in and going out. It's not that it's contained, actually. So it's more like a vehicle of these forces. And I love hearing that it isn't that you're like, oh, I'm over here now and I'm over here now, but that it's really, I don't know if I've ever heard anyone speak that way about making a painting. Do you even call them paintings? I guess that's the question.
I do, because I absolutely love being a painter. I feel it's, although I have called myself an artist in this in podcast, I mostly call myself a painter, because to me I feel my hands tingle. It's like I feel it's a true expression of that material relationship. And I think there's something about, it's interesting that you distinguish between being a vessel, and I think in a way Joanna Macy, the Buddhist philosopher, writer, meditation teacher, translator, poet, talks about the idea that we are a flow through. And it's not, but as the energy flows through us, it picks up the quality of each of us. So it's a kind of intra-dynamic flow through system that connects all of us all the time, everywhere. And I love that idea. And I think it's the closest to what my lived experience is of being a painter, that I understand that I'm not neutral. I'm Suzette. I am filled with my humanness, my shittiness, my desire, my love, my everythingness, my confusion. And as I meet these energies, they are also meeting me. And so there's a kind of a mutual kind of, it's, codependent co-arising, to use Joanna Macy's terminology, but for me, it's also like it's an opportunity to experience the healing potential within these patterns, because these patterns, the Sequoia pattern lives inside of my body. It's a way of receiving, grounding and connecting with earth energies that are so beyond my comprehension, but not at the same time, because I was there relating with them. I was there speaking and, kind of mingling with them. And I think, when we were talking about the idea of distraction and distress, that creativity and creation offers us the opportunity of co-mingling with these major patterns. And that's incredibly healing when we begin to really sort of know that it's not just decoration, it's not a luxury, it's actually how we might survive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you acknowledge and emphasize that it's not that Suzette is part of it, and all your complexity as an individual as well. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's super important. It's not about, I love Joanna Macy.
Yeah.
So happy you brought her into the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. What a human. Yeah.
Goals.
Yeah.
Life goals. Yeah. Yeah. And I really feel like that's one of the things that's so wonderful about her teaching too, is it's not about getting rid of anything. It's not about, I feel like this is my personal opinion, so take it for what it's worth. But, I often feel very like a side eye when people start talking about transcendence. Because for me, I often hear it as people just sort of wanting that escape route, and just like, please, can I just get out of this mess that I'm in, and I know that on the highest level that is not true, and it is speaking to something, but I think in this world of distress that we're in, that yeah, it's really hard to avoid that sense of get me out of here. And so I love that you're like not doing that in this work. And also just seeing while you were talking, it's like, oh, this idea of like the micro level and then this macro level, and just looking into the paintings and seeing them, within their shape. There is a shape. You haven't just covered the whole wall. No, there's a body. You referred to it as bodies. And I didn't realize you did this gluing. So there's like a weight like I'm imagining being in the room, which unfortunately I can't be, but
Yes.
there's a difference between a single sheet, piece of linen versus one that has places of heaviness and lightness. And
Yes. Yes. And actually, I'd love to show you on the page black. I'd like to go into a painting because it really speaks to, yeah, because it really speaks to what you're talking to. Um,
it's going slow because I'm using two things at once.
okay, so,
Okay,
yeah.
so yeah,
So
did I
scroll
go off?
down a bit. So, and just as we move down here, I think I want to say that, what you said about transcendence, for me, um, I mean, it's never going to happen. It just is like, um, and what's so exciting about being a painter, if we don't find the painting I'm wanting to show you,
Well, I
just
just
keep going.
enjoy looking at them
Yeah,
all. So I
yeah.
don't feel like in a huge rush, but yeah. Mm.
Um, there's it's like, I think, um, there's something deeply healing, and I'm not saying healing to get out of something. I'm talking about healing as a kind of a bathing in. Um, I mean, we could just stay here for a bit, and then I'll see if the painting's down there. This is a painting called Petroglyph, and it's like 2 meters by um, it's like 2.5 meters, no, 2.2 meters by 1.5 meters. So it's like 6'10" by 5 foot, something like that. So it's, when I'm working in the size, I'm working with the size of my own body. So I have very, very long arms. and um, and when I'm working like this, I'm working with my whole body. I'm working on the floor. I never work on a wall. I'm working over the painting. I'm working with a kind of direct core to core relationship with the painting. Again, this is a glued together painting in strips, I think. Then it's glued together, in quite a few pieces. So I'm looking to allow a relationship with pieces. It's not, I'm what interests me in my own life and the lives of other people, is the ways in which we piece and quilt together, the ways in which we try and compose our lives out of fragments, which are also kind of connected to a bigger whole. But and underneath all of this is a much bigger pattern of coherence. But our work, I think, what interests me anyway, is like bringing these pieces together, and that they create in every single instance something, kind of more different. And you can, this could be part of a much bigger quilt. But at the moment we're seeing, pieces of one piece. And this painting, when I made it, it feels like a whole journey inside a cave, or actually looking at one rock. And actually, when we were talking before we started the call together, you were asking me about my last name, Clough, and Clough in Gaelic actually means stone. And my relationship with stones is that when I see them, I feel like they're speaking to me. They literally feel like they have a voice, and they, have a way of speaking into me. And when I was making this painting, it felt like that was a connection that was coming through. The voice that kind of sits in a kind of, it's not prehistoric, it's not right, it's archaic, but it's where the rocks are forming when the planet is coming together out of the periodic table. And I feel very connected through the whole of my body when I look at this painting, but also when I was making it. And interestingly, the person who has this painting also has the Sequoia paintings. She bought all of them together, actually. And yeah, it was, yeah, it's like and she sees them as kind of like a weather system, as a grounding system in her home.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking, so many thoughts running through my head. But you know, when you talked about Sequoia, I immediately was like, oh, they're very human sized, but maybe slightly larger than human sized. Like, so there is that physical presence. But also, you know, also thinking about the pigments and the wax, and then sort of all of the senses, like the smell and yeah, and you know, just to say I live in Newfoundland, which they call
Wow, amazing.
the for good reason.
Yes.
And when I look out my window, I live on a bay, and across the bay are mountains, and sort of the hills beyond are this particular kind of mountain that is was once part of underneath the sea, the Earth's mantle, and it's red color dirt that
Wow.
has a chemical in it that doesn't allow plants to grow.
Wow.
And I think it's unique to Newfoundland.
Wow. Amazing.
And it's ancient. It's ancient, ancient, ancient. And so of course I'm immediately thinking about encounters with, like, you know, that, like, I've been told it's like millions, if not a billion years old. This is this rock. And the first time seeing it, and yeah, just being completely speechless in some kind of ancient connection. And trying to share it once with someone who was like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Being like, wow. You
Well,
know, I know. So yeah. Yeah.
it's I think that what we're both sharing between us is, like when I was little, I'm Australian, and where I grew up was, we had, my family owned a grocery store, a corner grocery store, and at the bottom of our street, called Mary Street in Sydney, in Beecroft, there was a huge, huge piece of nature, like wild bush. And there was a stream, a creek that ran through the bottom of you know, the land. And what I felt as a child was, I was scared of this place. I mean, it wasn't that I fell in love, but I fell in awe. It was so awesome, so powerful. And at the bottom of the street, you know, kind of buried right beside the creek, was a huge, huge rock. And I mean, to me, in my world, it felt like, oh, it was huge, and it was awesome. It was scary. It was like I couldn't climb it because I felt like it was too powerful. And I think that one of the things that we're talking about is the need and the experience of awe, and we need it. It's like it knocks us out of the anthropocentric positioning, and without a sense of awe, we can't look after where we live, you know, internally, but also in, you know, on in Earth. So when you describe the mountain that surrounds you, and your sense of kind of connection to ancients, and what it makes you feel like, you know, I feel that's what we need to be kind of connecting to.
Yeah. 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 I mean, you know, thank you for sort of pulling that all together, because it also makes me think about, you know, the distraction and the distress, and the the profound sadness that also arises of the state of things, what we
Yes.
have done to this incredible
Yeah.
land, the destruction, and
Mm.
reckoning, like having to feel that as the only way to properly take responsibility. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I just want to acknowledge, as we're talking, Robin, that I feel that shaky feeling that I felt when we first started. And it's to do with touching into the sacred and the awesome. Like I feel that's why I want to be a painter. And it's also what I think I covered up at art school. It's also what I covered up through different periods of my life. It's like where I meet my rawness. It's where I meet my stripped downness, my undoneness, where I meet my shakiness, and I don't often talk about how fucking amazing it is to have a relationship and a practice that allows me to meet awesomeness, and that really makes me feel sort of connected to you know the mountain you were talking about. It's like it is what makes me kind of want to lie on the ground and offer gratitude, and that's why I have to paint.
Mm.
I really want to show you this painting. I think it's scrolling down, and
Yeah,
because
I
I
was sort of like, okay,
that
we can end it
awesome.
right there. I think that is it. That is
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
this was one of them, but I think there's another one. That's Baobab Draining. This is not. This is, but I mean, all of them contain the same, um, kind of, um, yeah.
It's
I
nice
mean,
to see them in a scale
this is
also.
my studio. Actually, this is my
Yeah.
studio. Um, I'm not
So, I
even
mean,
sure.
if I've come to it.
Well, it just we could stop here, but I think we still haven't got to the painting I wanted to speak about. But we can talk about this. Yeah, but it's not. It's probably on another page. But this we could stop here. It's just called Cro-Magnon, and um, because it's we're talking about the same themes again. Again, this is like 6'8" by 5'5". It's a glued together painting made with beeswax and constructed canvas, natural pigments. Don't think I used ink here, but it's natural pigments that I mix myself just with PVA, which seems to work really well. It's I have used pastels with this, but what you see, and perhaps you can see in the center of the painting, is a skull, a kind of a skull of the yeah. If there's
If I
an
could.
antelope, a deer on the right hand side. There's a kind of either a crow above the antelope, and then towards the middle of the painting is um, a skull,
Uh-huh.
and none. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. None of which were painted by me. All of which kind of appeared in the painting as a communication, and that's my intention. That's my practice. My practice is to work with the oracular voice, the voice of the well, at this stage, I didn't call them creation ancestors, the pattern creation ancestors. What I was aware of was that I was creating spaces to, in some way, kind of call through these voices that I felt were wanting to speak, not only to me, but speak into the world. And I will mention my practice, my teaching practice, because visual medicine is the practice I teach, which is really a smaller version of these bigger paintings. It's a protocol again for working with opening a space for these voices to come through. And these voices are not disembodied. They have ancestral fields of information. and wisdom, that when in my practice, my kind of I never set out to work this way. It was like I felt over time I began to understand and see and be moved in order to hear differently, to be able to go, oh my Lord, this is what is wanting to speak to me. Um, this early human skull, this this kind of, so one of my ancient ancestors that has stepped out of the field, that is so barely visible, is wanting to come through and bring her voice to me. And my work as painter, as a, as a creator, is to find ways of listening, to not pass over this by painting her out. It's to allow her to settle, a bit like the old ways in which we used to develop photographs. It's like to allow this energy to settle on a developing tray. I've painted the photographic paper to allow the image to settle onto it, and that's how I see my practice. And I see it slightly differently now. I'm working more directly and more energetically with the pattern ancestors, but this is when it is, I think it's like 2012, but it probably would have been earlier, about 2010, I think, when these paintings started to come through, 27. When I started to actually begin to work with the possibility that that was my practice.
Again, so much comes to mind. I wonder, how did that feel when you, this realization that this is what's happening for you? Yeah, and I guess I want to say that when we spoke beforehand, when we met to see if this was
Yeah.
going to be a thing we would do.
Yes.
I had just recently read an article that talked about that the first human that had blue eyes was like a genetic anomaly. And
Yes.
then suddenly there was a person walking around with blue eyes. Until then, there had never been. And so everyone who has blue eyes today can trace themselves back to this ancestor.
Yes.
That's, tens of thousands of years old.
Mm.
And when I read that, I had a sensation in my body that I don't know if I've ever had, of feeling a connection with that level of ancestor.
Yes.
And it was simultaneously like exhilarating and scary. And I could feel myself immediately want to turn away. And of course, later reflecting on it all, thinking about how capitalism and colonialism have worked so hard to sever us from that experience and that connection, so that we will be productive in the system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're having awe on a daily basis, it's a lot harder to go work at Walmart every day,
Yes. Yes.
or go buy things at Walmart every day.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And when you are connected to awe that comes through your own body, your own, like that this comes through my body onto the canvas. And so when I first started painting like this, I mean, I felt, I felt the same mixture of awe and fear, like, sort of, is this true? Because as much as I might be talking about working with these ancestral fields and, the pattern creation ancestors, there is a part of me that's deeply skeptical. And so I'm like, really? But because my practice has been so long, and it's continued in this way, and I know I never set out to work this way. It came to me, through me. And I can trace it back to very early experiences of um, sort of looking um, into, in fact, I was just writing about this recently. When I used to have childhood illnesses like everybody, and my parents would, let me into their bed. And when that happened, and um, once when I was, they were downstairs working in a grocery store, and I was upstairs with a high temperature looking at the wallpaper in their bedroom. And what I was seeing is a kind of um, an Aboriginal, a very ancient Aboriginal man in the pattern of the wallpaper. And as I was kind of moving in and out of my hallucination, I would see him and lose him, see him and lose him. But in that kind of experience of seeing within the pattern this being that I felt in communication with, that was one of my first lived memories of kind of talking with the world, and the world talking back, and beginning to understand not only that I could see it and feel it, but it wanted to speak to me. And I think that's one of the deep abiding parts of my practice as an artist, that I have begun to feel into, that the materiality, the voice that sits within the body of the world, wants to speak to us. It's not a voice that speaks just to special people. It's a voice that wants to communicate with all of us. And in other kind of, other life is able to connect with weather systems. Other life is able to migrate. Other life is able to know when to go to sleep and hibernate. Other life is able to know when to grow, or to compost. And we have to kind of learn to listen in order to restore our capacity to hear.
Mm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Mm. I love that you've said listen and hear many times.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I just want to emphasize what you said about how, because I truly believe this also, that it's for whatever reasons that we probably will never know, you have come into this world, and through a set of conditions, here you are doing this thing. And it's not, it's available. It's available.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that in my teaching practice, I think, I see people doing it all the time. Like, there is a way of fine-tuning our capacity to hear these voices.
Mm.
It's like, it's not even fine-tuning, it's tuning into the right frequency. And I think it's time. I think it's really interesting. We went to see Hilma af Klint at the Tate last weekend, and her work with Georgiana Houghton and Emma Kuntz at the same time, even though they weren't working together, they were mediums. And their work, as I know, is it's like they saw themselves in relationship as mediums, working spiritually through their painting practices to bring through healing frequencies. And I think when I first, kind of became aware of their work, something in me just kind of dropped down, and I could feel like they are world receivers. They are receiving a kind of communication, but that communication has been with us forever. And there are many spiritual and indigenous traditions whose, they're there for us to listen. They're modalities for listening to the ways in which the world speaks.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that in her day, no one cared about what
Yeah, yeah.
she's doing. And
Okay.
now it's like, so that show was at the Guggenheim and
Yes. Yeah.
years ago, pre-pandemic, I think, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Or yeah, and the impact on, my artist friends
Hmm.
in New York, and sort of not just my friends, but like seeing just like, okay, so the time has come. The time has come.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I was just wondering if it might be, there is another page. I don't think we'll get to that image because I can't remember where it was, but I'd like to just show you something on my website called Nature Code, because I think it speaks very well of, yeah, of what the work that I've been doing is connected to in terms of patterns.
Uh-huh.
So on, oh, actually, well, I'll just read the words because they kind of, um, visual language is our first language, our mother tongue, the language we dream in. Visual language is the language of the earth, the material world of all living systems. We are connected through this visual language to the earth. Patterns hold the DNA of the earth, the generative blueprint of creation itself. Patterns are the thread connecting us to everything and everything to us. And um, on the left is one of my paintings, and on the right is a photograph of a kind of pattern held within the Earth's body. So on the right, there's a photograph of the Hamersley Range in Western Australia. And on the left is one of my paintings.
Mm.
And you can scroll through a little bit just to kind of get an overview. Yeah, rock language. On the right is a tree stump that's been burnt, and on the left is a detail of one of my paintings. I can't remember what it's called.
Mm.
After the fire.
Yeah. Mm.
And I think that's river mud, and the other one is a kind of wet painting that's part of a series of 4 works, which in a kind of extraordinary way looks like river mud when it dried.
Just like a technical question. So like this part that looks like the river running through the
Yeah,
landscape,
yeah.
what is this?
That is actually water, and so the painting when I took the photograph isn't dry.
Oh,
But when it's actually a dried image, what you see is it still has the shiny kind of patination of the water as it's kind of dried.
uh-huh.
Um, but what I'm trying to sort of facilitate is these patterns that live in our bodies and the body of the earth, and they live in the micro macro dimensions, both in our body as you travel into our cells, but as you kind of open out and travel into the cosmos. Why do these patterns exist? What's being held? What is the intelligence held within these patterns?
Mm.
Um, and that's the voice that I'm wanting to kind of hold in my work. That's the voice that I'm wanting to um, allow, to offer a space to come into in order for us to hear it.
So can I ask you, because this is um hmm, I mean, also when I look at this one, I like looking at this, I was like, oh, maybe that's like a internal body shot of like someone's veins or something, like,
Yeah.
oh, interesting. So how do you, is it a feeling, or how do you know when a piece is done? Or I'm curious if you have a relationship to like mistakes while you're working. Yeah.
Um, I think how I understand it feels a bit like um, a kind of agreed moment where we both go enough, the painting and me. And one of the things that I do is I leave a lot of space for the paintings to actually move when I'm not in the room. So, if I've been working, because I use a lot of water, particularly, in the UK, it takes a lot of time for water to dry. So it moves around for a long time. Um, and and then it will dry. And at that point, you know, I am a trained painter. I've done thousands and thousands of paintings. So I also do use my discernment, and I do use my aesthetics. I do go, we weren't, this is not working. I will repaint. So a lot of my work is created over many years, decades, and layered, many layered, and that can be up to 20 times. And it will also peel, and underneath there'll be another painting. So then we're getting into a kind of, palimpsest, interweaving relationship. So, and then sometimes paintings just come out, and, the one time it's just like, oh, wow, that was just like, that was and
Mm.
please do not paint over me. Please put this in a drawer and let it, set or rest. And be the communication it wants to be, and that does happen. But I'm very, very interested in archaeology, and I'm very interested in layering and energetic kind of building of both my energy and the energy of the energies I'm working with. So and what we're talking about is very ancient energies, from the origin.
Mm. 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 Yeah, I mean, I'm just keep being struck again and
Yeah,
again. How,
yeah,
each of them have this, like, it could be like a picture through a microscope, or
yeah,
it's like something taken from way above.
yeah.
Yeah, that is very powerful, very powerful.
And for me, that relationship, like, that comes through, the kind of the similarity, what is being hidden in this language, the language of, where that wet painting connects with a Catinus leaf, and that each Catinus leaf, when it's going into autumn and fall, is, each one of it is individual and different. There are never two leaves that are patternated in the same way, and that has a profound meaning for each human soul, that although we're connected, we have every single voice that's ever been born, will ever be born, is different, even though they might sound similar. Every fingerprint that's ever been on a hand is different, and that's not coincidence. That's because I think that sort of tranche of you-ness, me-ness, is important to creation itself. And I'm very affected by that idea, that held within the paintings, um, that no painting made this way will ever be the same as another painting. That's part of its DNA.
Mm. 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 I feel like there's about a million more topics we could cover, but I want to keep it to a manageable size.
Yeah.
We haven't looked at your visual medicine website, so I wonder, do you want to just
I'd
pop?
love to just pop there and have a little check-in.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
maybe just What do you mean by this visual med? I love this video. It's very I could watch it all day. So
Yeah.
what do you mean when you're saying this? I mean, you have shared a bit of what you mean, but
Well, visual medicine is the teaching practice that I started about 20 years ago, and it it's not I'm not teaching you how to be an artist, and I'm not teaching you about my art practice. Visual medicine is a practice that I developed, well, really came to me through asking this one question, which was, I was running a creativity group, and in the creativity group, it was the artist way at work. And at a certain point, sort of in like week 2 or something like that, I realized that people were not having the creative breakthroughs that telling someone be more creative was going to help them. And Mark Bryan, who was my mentor at the time, said, why don't you do some painting with people? And so I devised an exercise, and people just started doing things like happy faces. I said, paint how you feel or draw how you feel. People did happy faces or houses or trees. And I felt like this is not going too deep enough. This is not where transformation lives. And I asked my paintings to help me. And what came through really was the possibility of beginning to work with flow. And I was working with a watered down acrylic, some paper. I was dipping it in water, just kind of whooshing it around. And suddenly I had a kind of epiphany. And in that moment, I kind of heard something which was spirit loves to be made material. And I also felt something that this is the beginning of a way of working with people that does not require them to be skilled, but allows people an access to creative flow. And subsequently, I've been teaching visual medicine for 20 years. It's a practice that's just evolved and evolved and evolved. And I run a facilitation course where I teach people to teach it. I've worked with women coming out of prison. I've worked with children. I've worked with people who sit in the margins of society, and all can have access to their creative self that is not defined by skill. This kind of creativity is the creativity that we are born with, and it's the capacity to step into sort of, I think it's a dynamic relationship with creative spirit, and that lives in all of us.
Yeah, I feel like it's such a tragedy when people say they're not creative, such a disconnection. So yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And it's a way of, again, it's a language system. And again, it's a way of learning to hear our inner voice. And I think, for me, I feel deeply about this. I feel this is why I'm here in the world. And I know, that that each person has this part of themselves that I really want to be part of liberating. And we can do it in many ways. We can do it through dance. We can do it through movement. We can do it through using our voices. And for me, painting, this kind of painting is a way of liberating this profound relationship with creation.
So beautiful. All right, I'm going to stop the share. Unless there's another image you want to.
No, that's good, Robin. I feel like we've been diving, and just like I feel we've been on a journey where I feel like I think the world full of, oh God. Yeah.
Yeah, such a rich conversation, and I still somehow feel like we could keep going and
Yeah,
digging.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, which is such a testament to the depth of your practice and, your decades of doing this. There's no substitution for that.
Mm, mm, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Ooh.
Before we close, is there anything else? If people want to see your work, is there somewhere? I mean, you have your website and the visual medicine, which so can
Yeah,
people participate if they're interested?
totally. I offer short courses in visual medicine called Painting with the Universe. And that's you can also see me on Facebook. That's weirdly where I tend to actually share most. And I'm on Instagram using my own name, Suzette Clough, artist, and visual medicine org. And those are my websites too. They'll be in the links. But I think I just wanted to say in closing that I feel we've really dived deep, and I think I want to acknowledge you in the way that I don't often. I think there's something about disclosing the magic and the sacredness, um, and the divinity and the divination that we are talking about. These are not. They are complex. They are nuanced. They are profound things that we are both talking about and sharing together. And in other times, I think part of my frisson is not just in disclosing myself, it's talking about the magic and the power that sits within creative practice and what it truly connects to, which is a creative intelligence, which is binding the world together.
Mm.
And these are, it's like, it's holy.
Yeah, when you say that, I almost feel like, well, maybe we need some kind of ritual to close.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
just, okay, see ya.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I shared with you, I'm a yoga therapist, yoga teachers, and
Mm,
so for me, I go right to like, what can I chant? I should chant something
yes.
to close us out. So would that be okay? Would you
I would
mind?
love you to. And I just want to put my hands over my heart center and just also kind of thank the creation beings that I work with
Mm.
and my ancestor line and the ancestors of the earth, the deep energies in which um, the field of the beings that we all sit within, and to acknowledge our shared resources and joined planet. Um, and to you, Robin, for creating this conversation.
Do a short chant then
Thank you.
for all beings. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishravahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti